Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, where the art and science of operational excellence come to life through captivating stories of triumph, challenge, and transformation from the front lines of industry. Our distinguished guests, from manufacturing pioneers and medical device innovators to aerospace visionaries, diagnostic lab leaders, and major capital project leaders, unveil the hidden patterns and powerful insights that drive exceptional results in the complex world of operations. Join us on this journey of discovery as we explore the brilliant minds behind the systems that make our world work and uncover the leadership secrets that could revolutionize your approach to operations forever. Here is your host, Ed Pound.
Welcome to the Operations Science Podcast. Our next guest is working at the intersection of one of the fastest growing industries on the planet and one of its least discussed consequences. Electric vehicles are reshaping transportation worldwide, and lithium-ion batteries are the engine behind that transformation. But what happens to these batteries when they reach the end of their life? The answer matters for anyone concerned about sustainability and the environment. Today's guest is helping build a solution from the ground up. He's part of a new generation of leaders designing large-scale industrial systems to greatly reduce a potentially massive toxic waste consequence of the EV revolution. Please welcome to the Operations Science Podcast, Julian Engelberger. Hello, Julian. How are you?
Hey, Ed, very good. How are you? Thanks for the invitation and thanks for having me. Looking forward.
Glad you're here. This is an interesting topic, I think, of concern to a lot of people. So let's get started. Why don't you start by describing your current role and what you're responsible for building today?
Absolutely. So I'm currently working at Scilib. Scilib is a European battery recycling company. We're aiming to become Europe's leading battery recycler by 2030. And my job is to build the operations, to build first of a kind recycling facility in Dormagen, Germany, and build all the supporting operations from the supply chain, the IT backbone, ensuring that we're complying with HSE legislation and so forth. In short, I'm building the execution muscle of Scilib to make sure that we can actually deliver on our ambition.
And this is a greenfield facility, so it is getting started from the ground up.
That's actually a brownfield facility. We will certainly touch upon that later. It is a brownfield facility for very particular reasons. I mean, we're a young company. We are trying to make sure that we focus ourselves really on what we do best, which is developing and industrializing our technology. And building the first factory in our footprint, we wanted to make sure that we focus on what's essential for us. So therefore, we decided to locate our plant in a chemical park in Germany, giving us access to infrastructure, giving us access to infrastructural services like a fire brigade, tapping into established permitting structures and so forth, de-risking our core business, which is industrial recycling of batteries.
Well, that makes complete sense, right? You're recycling batteries. Why not recycle a facility that's already there?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. So you come from a strong operations research and consulting background. How did that shape how you approach this situation and real world situations in general?
I think it comes down to two main aspects. One of them is speed. And then second is a very systematic and structured approach to problem solving and decision taking. I did my PhD in stochastic optimization, optimizing essentially how production planning should be done under uncertainty. And in mathematical optimization, you have to explicitly define your objectives. You have to explicitly state your constraints. And then you systematically evaluate your decision options, your solution space against these objectives and constraints. And that is something, making objectives and constraints very explicit, but also then systematically analyzing all the options that we have available, has been very deeply ingrained into my ways of working at BCG already. But then also now I very clearly expect such a structured and clear approach in any decision that my teams are proposing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's we could go far afield on that, but that's a primary concern with operations science because, as you mentioned, you have to state your constraints and the world necessarily doesn't work the way that you set up the optimization, and understanding the underlying science really helps people make decisions in the face of uncertainty. But you certainly, in any case, need to have a structured approach to it and not just kind of wing it and say, we're just going to do something. Eliminate waste is a great idea, but it doesn't have a whole lot of information in it. You need more structure to it than that. So
Absolutely. And I mean, certainly with mathematical optimization, you can only come so far. But the overall approach, having that structure and making explicit what you're optimizing for, what you cannot violate in any case, guides my thinking quite a lot. Making sure that, okay, I am explicit about these topics, and then making sure that, okay, I take a somewhat systematic approach. Then certainly reality typically kicks in and makes you forget about some of these topics. Point fully taken. Yeah.
yeah, but even so, for people, when you're working with people, having a structured framework makes a big difference because it kind of eliminates everybody, having an opinion like, oh, it's, there are 20 different opinions. Well, there are 20 different opinions, but there's really kind of a limited solution set, and let's work on those. So the structure.
Absolutely. Two topics, even from my perspective. One, exactly as you described, everyone has an opinion. And secondly, the tendency to go down one rabbit hole and not come out again. From that perspective, it helps a lot optimizing and finding an optimal solution in a mathematical sense that is not just optimizing for one particular very narrow problem, but rather a broader business problem, actually.
So that's a very, very useful background for what you're doing now. Battery recycling, I take it, is relatively new outside of Asia, maybe because that's where a lot of batteries are made. But what makes operating in this emerging industry fundamentally different from what you've done before? And what are the challenges that you're seeing just in building your new facility?
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back at BCG, actually, as I somehow started in that field of building new businesses, particularly in the battery space. It was first time, I think, in the beginning of the 2020s when I came across an exciting project about building a new battery cell business for a tech company. And somehow I fell in love with these topics because it's really, on the one side, great opportunities, but on the other side also quite significant challenges that you're facing over and over. I mean, the opportunities are very clear. You have a market that is, especially in the battery recycling field in Europe, it's almost untapped. You are a new market entrant. You can move with speed. You can shape the environment around. You can really build up the business environment and optimize for that business environment that you're aiming for. But at the same time, I mean, it comes with great uncertainty. If I just look into the battery industry, for example, the demands are highly uncertain. For the year of 2030, McKinsey estimated in 2019 that the market size will be 2.6 terawatt hours, which is quite sizable. Now, 4 years later, they estimated plus 60% versus that estimate. And now, 3 more years later, they're estimating minus 10% versus the 23 estimate. So you see that size of amplitude of the market demands is massive. And you need to somehow, I mean, we're in an asset heavy business. We need to build a facility in the end that matches what we believe is the most plausible scenario in that market.
Yeah, you have to make bets ahead of time, and you want to build in flexibility because there's uncertainty.
Absolutely, and we don't want to overexpose ourselves to a bet on too high market demands. But on the other side, we also don't want to come up with a very small and therefore maybe incompetitive facility and then being overtaken by others that go bigger from the start. So that's quite a difficult and complex optimization problem. But overall, we believe that it plays to our strength. We are used to move fast. We're used to working hard to outpace our competition. We have a technology that's scalable quite well. So from that perspective, we feel like we're in a very good position, but the challenges, of course, remain, and also the uncertainty remains. That's something that we need to live with, that ambiguity.
Well, so let's talk about battery recycling specifically for the audience, because I'm not very familiar with it, and I know there are a lot of lithium-ion batteries coming on the market. People are building battery facilities in the States here, very large facilities, and that's kind of a pretty nasty chemical, when it's done. What does that process look like?
Absolutely. At least in Europe, it's classified as hazardous waste. I guess it's pretty similar in the US and anywhere else in the world. Um, so from that perspective, it's very highly regulated. Typically, the process starts with, I mean, you have some sort of end of life batteries that have fulfilled their usable lifetime, be it in cars, be it in energy storage systems. And they need to be first discharged and disassembled, taken apart essentially, and put into a format that you can mechanically shred them into what we call black mass. Black mass is essentially a shredded battery, very fine composite, and the exact composition depends on then the batteries that you're using. It can be for most electric vehicles, it's currently a compound of lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt. For newer electric vehicles, mainly driven by the Chinese producers, it's iron phosphate, so lithium iron phosphate. And these are then the compounds that need to be taken into their chemical building blocks, essentially. And that happens through metallurgical processes. That can happen in pyrometallurgical, so using heat processes, or in hydrometallurgical processes using liquids. And the end result is always you have some sort of, for example, lithium carbonate or lithium hydroxide, and nickel sulfates, cobalt sulfates that are very, very pure.
Okay, so what you're saying is you take the batteries out of a car. Those batteries, then you take the active material out of the case. For instance, you're not just going to take the case itself and just throw it in a grinder and grind everything up. And then
Essentially, you try to do it, of course, in as large pieces as possible. Then you have some obviously physical limitations, but certainly you will not try to spend too much manual effort on opening the cells and so forth. One, because it's dangerous and toxic, and secondly, because it's just for efficiency's sake easier to grind them apart.
okay, so that must be some pretty strong grinding processes that you've got there, because those batteries are not particularly delicate. And so then there's either a melting process with heat, or I call it a dissolving process with water to get to the raw components that you're looking for. Is that an accurate description?
Absolutely. And I mean, there's different companies specializing on different parts of that process. We are really coming from the hydrometallurgy. So Scilib is based on a hydrometallurgical process that has certain advantages, especially that it's water-based, that fit quite well to the requirements in the European battery ecosystem. And other companies are fully focused on doing the mechanical processing parts and so forth. The market in battery recycling is still quite fragmented overall.
Yeah, that was my next question, is what's happening to the batteries that are there now, right? I mean, because there are plenty of those still. Currently, how does that work? Is it battery recycling, or do they just get put in landfills?
I think landfills is only a last resort, and practically doesn't happen, just due to the environmental impact of using these batteries. Many companies try to build business models around a second life application. So essentially using an EV car battery that has spent their EV lifetime, but would still be good enough for some housings, battery storage applications. And then later on, once it's really done, then they are being torn apart and recycled into battery metals. I mean, that does exist. That processes or that industry is already quite advanced in China, particularly, also in other parts of Asia, like South Korea. In Europe and North America, that battery ecosystem is still very nascent. So from that perspective, there's great, on the one side, dependency still on import of batteries and import of battery materials, and on the other side, great business opportunity for companies like, I mean, in the US, you have Redwood, for example, that are trying to tap that market and be part of that ecosystem, building up more localized, regionalized batteries.
Okay, so that's very helpful. Now I think I have a better picture in terms of what's happening with batteries when you're recycling them. When you're looking at setting up your new facility, I mean, capital investment, as you mentioned before, is just a critical concern with all of the uncertainty. How do you manage that flexibility? You mentioned one thing, you guys are using a brownfield facility. Are there other considerations for managing capital as you grow the business?
Coming back to my stochastic optimization background, I mean, what I learned during my more scientific times in operations research is that there's essentially two kinds of solutions for such a decision problem under uncertainty. On the one side, you can use robustness. You can, I mean, we back then called them fat solutions, but they are called fat for a reason. Typically, they are very expensive. In our case, that would mean that we build capacities based on a best case scenario of the market development and assuming very high market shares for silane. And I mean, we to some extent see such strategies currently in battery cell manufacturing. We see that capacities exceed the market demands substantially, and that leads to, on the one side, low utilization in the industry, and at the other side, very low prices that make it very hard to achieve sufficient prices in the shop. On the other side, and that is what we are actually focusing on, is building that flexibility and building step by step, building up these capacities. So in that case, you can optimize much more deliberate on what you want to build and what you don't want to build at a certain point in time. But your technology needs to support it. If we go back to the distinction between hydrometallurgical and pyrometallurgical recycling processes, pyrometallurgical processes are great, but they require a lot of scale to be competitive. Hydrometallurgical processes, especially if they're water-based and use relatively few chemicals, these processes are relatively easy to handle in such an environment and relatively easy to build up step by step. That gives us a flexibility that allows us to enter the market relatively early. We have no doubts that we will be able to fill our first plant in Dormagen. And going forward, we certainly have then the footprint, the blueprint of our Dormagen facility to scale it up in the way that the market needs it. But for us, we can really control the point of the investment and the scale of the investment to make sure that we don't overexpose ourselves to that risk.
Yeah, that sounds brilliant, actually. You know, working with basically it's a production of capacity and you're working with smaller batch sizes. So you don't have to invest so much in the way of capital, but you can respond fairly quickly, it sounds like. Let's talk about the people side. So you're starting up a new business. It's in a brownfield facility, but what part of your role requires managing people to make that happen? Or is that all of your role?
It's hard to distinguish between what parts do and what parts not. Certainly, all parts of my role somehow are involved with people, and that's an absolutely crucial part of success. I mean, we at Scilab, we pride ourselves being very passionate, very hardworking people, very reliable people, and also um, focusing to be excellent in all that we do, and building up such a culture that does so over an extended period of time. I mean, you don't build a plant, as you certainly know, you don't build a plant within months. It's a story of years that you will need to be able to motivate people and to get them to delivering their very best every day, and um, and that is certainly one of the big challenges. I mean, we especially in Europe, we do have a brand now that is very helpful in getting these people. But then once they're on board, certainly we as leaders of the company need to make sure that they maintain that level of motivation, that drive, that passion for excellence every day, and give it their best.
Yeah. So what in your previous experience, I mean, what works well for you in that regard in forming a team and maintaining that level of passion that you want?
I think on the one side, it's treating people with respect. And treating people with respect, I don't mean being polite. Certainly, of course, we should be polite to people and be honest and upright somehow. But really treating people on eye level and trusting that they are putting in their very best as well, and trusting that they are pushing for the same objectives helps a lot. So that level of respect is absolutely crucial. At the same time, that must not lead to a culture of wrongly framed empathy. So, of course, we want to be empathetic, but we also want to give the uncomfortable feedback if it's required. We also want to make sure that we are that all of us are learning and improving our ways of working. So managing that balance between, okay, yes, I want to treat everyone with the utmost respect and provide all the information that everyone needs to take the right decisions, and at the same time saying not what the other person wants to hear, but what the other person must hear. That combination brings you very far from my experience.
Yeah, indeed. You have to have that balance because yes, you want to be respectful of people, and people have they have lives outside of work. But on the other hand, if they don't do what gets required, what's required to be done for work, and you don't tell them, it ends up badly for everybody. So yeah, that is a balance, definitely. So let's switch topics and talk about the latest and greatest topic that everybody's talking about, which is artificial intelligence. Are you using the large language models in your planning, or will it be used as part of your support? How is AI working with your job?
And that's a very good question. And there's not one answer to it. One part of the answer is, as all companies, we are experimenting with Gen AI applications and trying to make use of it as good as possible. But what we see a lot in the industry, that just piloting AI applications does not really get you anywhere. You need to have a systematic approach, some big bets that really make an impact on your core business. Otherwise, it's just going to be, I mean, it's going to be some single digit efficiency savings that are nice to have, but that don't really leverage the full potential of so from that perspective, we are working hard to identify and realize these big bets. And that, for example, looking at our production process, we have a process where, I mean, it's recycled batteries or end-of-life batteries that we receive as a feedstock. We don't control what's in there. We, to some extent, of course, can choose what we want, but in the end, we will need to take what we get. And from an operations perspective, the factory needs to operate efficiently, no matter if the batteries are exactly according to what we planned for in the business case, or if they are somehow deviating from that. And understanding and learning that behavior of our process versus the black mass out there in the market and the batteries out there in the market. That is, for example, something where we believe that AI can really give us a push can really give us an edge in achieving much higher yields than otherwise. Nevertheless, of course, we're also using applications of Gen AI for all sorts of document creation and so forth. Like pretty much everyone does in their professional and in their private lives, right?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was at a company I was working with last week, and I asked the same question of them as I ask everywhere, and they had an interesting answer. They said they required everybody. I don't know if they required the janitor, but most of their employees to take 12 hours of training on AI. And I think actually, in reflection on that, that sounds like a pretty good idea because, as you say, I mean, there's some big bet things that you can do with AI that 12 hours of training is not going to help you with. But boy, doing things like note taking on calls like this, creating reports, reviewing documents, it can be really helpful on a personal level. Do you do any of that similar training, or how does that work?
Absolutely. I mean, we're a company that has been founded a few years back only. So our staff is natively, to a large extent, very keen to take on these topics. But nevertheless, I mean, we represent all groups of the society, and we do have very dedicated and tailored trainings to support everyone with what they need for it. We had communication campaigns and training campaigns once we launched our first serious AI project 1.5 years back, and it took us not a long time until many people, where we never thought that's possible, adopted and greatly delivered administrative tasks through AI. So from that perspective, I'm a big fan, but nevertheless, I strongly believe that this is not enough. It has to be more than just a replacement of Googling and the replacement of some administrative tasks that otherwise would take 1.5 hours longer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be, I think that's probably going to be sort of just the common thread for everybody eventually. But to your point, the big gains are for some of the larger projects, as you mentioned, like with production planning. So how many people are we talking about? I mean, what's the size of the staff that you have now, and what will it be when you become fully operational?
I mean, as of now, we're 120 people around, still growing. I mean, we're still in the build-up of our plant. So the plant team is, as of now, I mean, I'm right now physically located in the plant, but most of the plant team is actually an engineering and project delivery team. So from that perspective, we'll substantially grow for our first plant, and then of course our ambition doesn't stop. So it's a little bit hard to say what headcount we're targeting steady state. We're expanding our business operationally, but we're also looking horizontally into the market on how we can increase our footprint. But certainly we're growing fast. We're growing fast, and that's of course a big challenge as well. You need to onboard people. You need to select the right people, and then make sure that they are actually delivering value.
Right. So is it a challenge? I don't know how the labor market is in Germany, but is it a challenge hiring people?
Generally, I would say and I hate to say it, but the labor market is playing to our favors. Generally, I mean, in Germany we have an automotive industry and a chemical industry that is feeling um, uh, the pressure. And from that perspective, we actually have been able to attract top tier talent in the last months, um, that really help us, that bring a level of experience and a level of delivery to our team that is mind blowing. But at the same time, of course, it's I would be even more happy if it would be a little bit more challenging in the economic outlook, and the business outlook in Europe would be a little bit um, more lightening up. So, but so far we are really happy with the people that we can get on board.
And so are you getting also, I would think this would be something that the government would really provide incentives for. Are you getting a lot of cooperation from the government because it is such an important part of sustainability?
Yes, I think that is that is actually a very nice feeling also for us. We feel like we have strong support from private investors, strategic investors, but also more venture capital oriented investors, but also from public investors, be it through direct investments, but also be it through grants. We have just in the last half year for our first facility in Dormagen received 2 grants, one from North Rhine-Westphalia and one from the the Ministry of Economics in Germany, totaling to around 90 million euros, and that really helps us financially, obviously, to finance our facility, but it also gives us the confidence and the backing that society, that Germany wants us to be successful. That um, that is very encouraging for us, because certainly the battery market and the battery industry is heavily dependent on China as of now, and seeking that will of the European Union, of North Rhine-Westphalia, of Germany, seeing that will is very encouraging.
Yeah, well, I mean, who is not in favor of taking a very toxic, nasty chemical and turning it into something useful, especially since there's a lot of it coming on, evidently. So, yeah, that's great. Absolutely. So, when you're looking at this, are you, a lot of conversations that I have with people that are involved in continuous improvement and operational excellence. Do you have a formal effort at operational excellence, for instance, in your project management processes, or something you're building into your the facility planning and production as you're going forward, or are you just in project management, get the planet up and going phase right now? How is that working?
I mean, answer is twofold. On the one side, obviously, we are committing lots of resources into making sure to build that plant in time, in scope, and budget. So I and the leadership team in operations, we are trying to not put too much distractions on them, and try to make them focusing on the project. But of course, we recognize that having robust operational standards, having robust quality standards, learning how to operate such a complex facility is absolutely crucial. And that's where we leverage our pilot line facility in Aachen. That is where we have piloted our recycling process, and that is where we are currently working heavily towards optimizing the process in a way to understand exactly how do we need to tweak process parameters in case feedstock variability changes and so forth. And that is where we see, I mean, almost like a playground. We are operating that pilot line to develop operational standards, operational procedures, plant performance management, continuous improvement cascades, and so forth, to make sure that once we have the plant built up here in Dormagen, then we know how we want to operate it in detail, and we also have the people, the at least the core team, already trained in what and how they need to run the plant.
Yeah, fascinating. That's starting up a new facility is always an adventure. That sounds like, but it sounds like you've got it a good plan and lots of good considerations in terms of optimization considerations, process development. What are you using for project tracking? I'm always curious about this. Do you guys use something like Primavera is very popular, Microsoft Project, or some people just use Excel? What are you using?
I mean, for such a project, my personal view is at least that Microsoft Excel is not an adequate tool to manage. So we are working with one of the with one of the two that you have just mentioned. And actually, I mean, that's a point that's a topic that is very, from my perspective, very success critical. Building a delivery engine for such a large capex project is absolutely crucial. Building the delivery engine from a timeline management perspective, from a cost management perspective, from a scope and change management perspective, then thinking about how to cooperate with your engineering partners, procurement partners, construction partners, thinking that model through. I mean, I've done many years of consulting in manufacturing environments and have seen many projects. Typically, we were of course hired when things didn't go that well. So I seen many of these topics going not so well, and now I have the opportunity to shape it in a way that I am confident that we can deliver the project on time and scope and budget. And so far, our track record has been quite good, but I mean, it's still a long way to go. So it's to declare victory again.
Yeah. You don't want to declare victory just yet. One of the things we see, and this is just a classic operation science application, the actual project itself is a production process, right? And so if you're using Microsoft Project or you're using Primavera, one of the key things in any production process is capacity management. Are you actively tracking and WIP management, right? And so in projects, people go, oh, we're not making widgets, we're not recycling actual batteries here. This project is, those concepts don't apply, which is a terrible thing to think, because you have work in process. It's just tasks. It's virtual. It's knowledge work. It's not physical work. Are you modeling that the way you would model, one of your stochastic optimization of a production process? How is that proceeding?
I think that depends a little bit on the stage of the project that you're in. I think there's some tasks that work very well modeling them like a production process that consumes X amount of resources. And then there's other tasks where it essentially comes down to, okay, it takes a team of 3 engineers for 2 weeks to figure it out. And I mean, if you're taking the latter or if you're facing the latter problem, then capacity management in such a tool, from my perspective, it is of limited help. The closer you get to construction, the more important is it to see actual the resources, the resource buildup over time, and then comparing what do you have on site, what did you plan to have on site, and so forth. As of now, we are still in the construction, in the early construction phase, rebuilding our facility here, and that is still a lot of engineering work where we look into milestone trend analysis and so forth, but not yet looking so much into the resource count. But certainly will come.
Well, not just the resource count, but also the work in process control. Making sure that people aren't overwhelmed with work or underwhelmed.
Absolutely. I mean, just like classic factory physics, right? Where you want to have work and process control, where you want to make sure that as much is leaving the factory, the project delivery factory, as much as entering it completely with you. So from that perspective, absolutely. That from my perspective is still a few months out. And then at the same time, of course, such project management tools like MS Project, like Oracle Primavera, that provide you an unlimited playing field of what you can do. And then it's also about
Yeah, that can be a problem. Yeah,
exactly. It comes down on what you want to do and what you feel like is business critical and what you don't want to do. And yeah, it's also a trade-off. It's a trade-off. But the two aspects that you mentioned certainly key to make sure that you actually deliver and not just open new tasks and don't close the old ones.
definitely. All right, excellent. Let's shift gears here in the last few minutes and talk about you as a person. Where did you grow up? What were you like as a student?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up as the second child of I'd say a middle class family in Germany.
You have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I had three brothers and sisters, um, and I was the second. One thing that certainly stood out from early on was that I really had a strong desire to go all in for topics that I really enjoyed. Be it in was a lot in sports, it was a lot in music, and then later on in my professional life, I couldn't really stand doing something with 80%. It was all in or go big or go home essentially, and that then took me some time actually to find a spot besides sports and music, which I liked but didn't really see my professional future in. To really find a spot where I would somehow feel at home and feel comfortable and would have the intrinsic motivation somehow to go all in. And then yeah, it came over time. It came over time. It certainly wasn't. I certainly wasn't a fully dedicated student from the start. But once I started my PhD, um, I certainly was as committed. Yeah,
Yeah, if you're going to work on a PhD, you kind of need to be dedicated. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And that was actually on coincidence somehow. I had one professor who somehow saw something in me, and it started with proofreading a book on operations research, and then somehow dragged me into that topic, doing my master's thesis on production planning, and then later on doing my PhD. And that was really an experience that shaped me and that shaped my thinking process, and yeah, that set the foundation to many of the steps that I took afterwards. So
So that's great. So you had I'm sure you had early influences. I mean, your parents, were they in technical fields?
no, my parents actually were teachers. Honestly speaking, I don't think I was predestined to do what I do now. I think what somehow pulled me in, I did vacation jobs whatsoever in production from very early on. Working as a assembly worker in automotive supplier industries. I was constantly working in all the free time that I had, and somehow I started to be attracted by these large factories, large systems that somehow work together very efficiently and that are somehow impressing. It was more an emotional point in time at that point, and then, well, without a lot of thinking, I would say I then landed in production engineering. But as I mentioned, somehow I also learned that the technical aspects of production engineering were interesting, but not really what I was willing to get up for. So from that really came when I thought, okay, when I learned that you could actually describe all these processes that are happening with numbers, with and solve them better or worse, and that really turned the switch for me.
Okay. So when you the professor who was such a strong influence on you, do you still have contact with him or her?
I do. Yes, I do. I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm not in academia anymore, so and I also, even though I had the ambition for a long time to stay close to academia, but uh, looking into academic journals is pushing you quite a bit with a limited time schedule. So from that perspective, it's not as close as it used to be, but every now and then certainly, certainly. And I still do some teaching at the university that I came from, trying to pass some of my passion on to the next generation. But yeah, that's I guess how things are just going then naturally.
And so you mentioned music. What do you do outside of work when you want to get away from all of the details of work?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's helpful to have a job that I generally enjoy doing. So from that perspective, I can live with that my purely private time is maybe not as much as one could hope for. Nevertheless, of course, I try to do some sports. I have a wife and a daughter that I of course love to spend time with, and but that's pretty much it. I think that's going running several times a week and spending time with my family. That's really what helps me recharge, and then trying to not drain too much energy in a job.
Yeah, that's always the balance in it. Well, listen, Julian, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Fascinating topic and actually very, very relevant for today because EVs are just coming on strong. Really appreciate your comments, your insights, and I think the audience will too. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Ed, very much for the invitation and for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
The Operation Science podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights. Join the conversation and help us shape the future together. Join the Operation Science Institute at opscience.org. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode. The views expressed by our guests are their own and do not represent their company's views unless specifically stated as such.